Welcome to the Explainer. Today we're diving deep into the union of intersections, splicing the lifeline. We are literally unpacking the mathematical and architectural blueprint for saving our hyper-complex society from systemic collapse. Seriously, the very fate of our civilization rests right on an exact mathematical boundary, the specific zone where two vastly different paradigms cross. It's all about bridging the turbulent, chaotic reality of our local daily operations with the absolute unyielding structures of global reality. Let's jump right into the framework that makes this survival possible.
Here is our roadmap for today. We'll start with the fractured firmware crisis, move into the bottom-up hypergraph, and then look at the top-down global field. From there, we'll hit the critical junction, talk about splicing the lifeline, and wrap up with the immovable foundation. All right, let's get into it.
Section 1. The Fractured Firmware Crisis, a Society Disconnected.
Think about this concept for a second because it really hits the nail on the head. The crisis of our era is that we are trying to run a high-velocity, hyper-complex global society on a fractured firmware. We are operating a massive, high-speed system on a fundamentally broken foundation. And what exactly makes it fractured? Well, our systems treat two absolutely vital perspectives, local, ground-level data, and top-down global oversight, as if they're mutually exclusive. We're trying to build up from the bottom while completely, entirely, ignoring the immovable constraints coming from the top. Mathematically speaking, that is just a guaranteed recipe for collapse.
Section 2. The bottom-up hypergraph. Chaos in the engine. So let's look at these two dueling paradigms. On one side, we've got the bottom-up hypergraph engine. Think of this as the daily grind. It's chaotic, it operates in processing overdrive, making millions of discrete, localized steps. But here's the catch. Every single one of those steps accumulates a logic tax, leaving behind this residue of entropy. Now, on the exact opposite side of the spectrum, we have the top-down global field. This one is characterized by absolute stillness. It's an undeformable base node that prevents the whole system from just floating away into a uniform void.
Let's see how this builds into a massive problem for the bottom-up engine. When this bottom-up system tries to run totally on its own, without any boundary conditions, it creates what the source calls a tower of obstruction layers. It starts off fine at level 0, the trace layer, just the global identity mass. But as the calculations run, bam, we hit level 1, the first cyclic defect. The logic just doesn't close perfectly, and we get the onset of a directional collapse. By level 2, the system's failure to resolve its own inconsistencies shows up as literal loop curvature or structural torsion. It's kind of like trying to fold a fitted bedsheet perfectly, right? Without a rigid template, the chaotic folds just build up tension until the whole thing is a lumpy, unmanageable mess. That is exactly our bottom-up system buckling under its own weight.
Section 3. The top-down global field, the unyielding anchor. Okay, so if the bottom-up approach naturally degrades into chaos, how exactly does the top-down field function? Well, the absolutely crucial point here is that this top-down field is completely uncompromising. The texts actually refer to it almost mythologically as an angel or a grim reaper. Why? Because it represents the absolute termination point. It is an undeformable base node. It doesn't move, it doesn't bargain, and it definitely doesn't adjust its parameters just to make things comfortable for a struggling local node. It just sits beneath the active layers, absorbing pure downward force, acting as a fundamental constant of reality that keeps the whole matrix from caving in.
The topological math behind that unyielding stability is fascinating. I know, mapping equations of higher dimensional spheres sound incredibly complex, but what they represent is actually pretty straightforward. They give us a mathematical guarantee that distinct, complex fields can structurally bridge and lock together, almost like puzzle pieces. It proves that there are absolute constants acting as their own anchor, mathematically prohibiting the system from deforming out of shape.
Section 4. The Critical Junction, the mathematical splicing.
All right, so we have the chaotic bottom-up engine and the rigid top-down field. How in the world do we stitch them together? This is where we hit the most vital concept of our explainer, the critical junction. The intersection of these two fields is literally the only zone where structural integrity can be recovered. It acts as an absolute resolution ledger, a complete accounting system. For this to actually work, the bottom-up must accept boundary conditions. It has to recognize it's not operating in a uniform void. Its paths are explicitly constrained, guided, and structured by the top-down global section. It must account for its gaps. At the exact same time, the top-down must execute using mathematical tools known as restriction morphisms and sheaves. It can't just remain some abstract ideal up in the clouds. It has to project itself down into concrete, localized, repeatable data streams that can run natively right there on the ground level.
Section 5. Splicing the lifeline. Zero trust integrity.
When those two fields finally lock together at the critical junction, they form this unbreakable chain known as zero-trust linkage. In this spliced lifeline, every single step is the literal, physical substrate for the next one. It absolutely has to compile perfectly in sequence, 1 to 2, 2 to 3, all the way to 6. There is zero parallel skipping allowed. You try to jump from 1 to 3? No way! The logical bridge just collapses into an unpassable terrain blockage. It effectively forces the chaotic bottom-up process to be perfectly honest at every single microstep. It eliminates doubt entirely, because even the potential for error is mapped out as a pre-accounted substratum.
And finally, Section 6. The Immovable Foundation. Engineering the bedrock.
To pull all of this together, let's step away from the abstract math for a second and look at how this manifests in the physical world. When civil engineers build massive structures that have to withstand catastrophic forces, they use deep caisson foundations. They anchor the entire system directly into the Earth's crust. In the exact same way that mathematical sheaves connect local data to a global space, the physical tower above no longer just sits on top of the land, it actually becomes an extension of the bedrock itself. So, when high-velocity shocks hit that system, the kinetic energy is instantly routed down the spine and safely dissipated into the absolute unmoving mass of the planet.
Which brings us to our final and honestly most crucial takeaway. As you look at the systems we build today, whether they're technological, societal, or organizational, you really have to ask yourself, is your system just floating in a uniform void of infinite flexibility, accumulating logic tacks until it twists and collapses? Or has it been properly spliced at the critical junction, anchoring its chaotic bottom-up velocity firmly into the undeformable bedrock of a top-down absolute foundation? Remember, true resilience, the kind we need to survive the crisis of our era, only exists at the union of these intersections. Thanks for joining me on this explainer. Keep questioning the foundations, and I'll catch you next time.